I'm going to tell a story that is my story. I'm going to talk about the same relationship we were both in, but I experienced it different than him. And what I think is important to know is your experience is real, and so is theirs. And so when I tell this story, it is absolutely, it's funny. There have been times Josh is like, that's not how that went at all. It's like, but that's how I experienced it. I was living in a whole different reality from an internal relationship that he wasn't experiencing. So I just want to say that and make that here because, like I said, Josh and I have been together a really long time. And if you cannot tell already by the way we just physically are, we are very different. He's covered in tattoos. He's wildly rugged. He could care less what you all think. And I'm over here with my straightened hair and polished and professional stuff. Like we are yin and yang. We have always been like, you are interesting. You are so different than me. We have been wildly attracted to each other for that way. It has been our, greatest, like, you fascinate me. And also like, I don't understand you. You're so different than me. We are not alike. We are not alike. And so when growing up and being in a relationship together, why I'm saying this is because the stories we tell become true. You can tell yourself a good story or you can tell yourself a bad story. And whatever you tell, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So one of the stories that I told about Josh, the minute he kissed me, I was like, I'm gonna marry him. I'm gonna marry him. We're gonna be together for the rest of our lives. We're gonna have a love story like nobody else. And I believe we have lived out that love story. Every time we were in a hard time, I believe we were in the middle of a challenge in our love story. There was never this, so where Jeremy was afraid of commitment, I was like, I met you at 14, I'm committed. Like if you asked me today, I'd say yes. My parents were like, what's wrong with this girl? But my point is I told that really good story and it became the way I showed up in our relationship. 100,000% commitment I'm in. So every time there was a hard time, there was no leaving energy. There was just, this is a hard time in our story. The same can be true for the stories I told about our relationship that I believed that made things harder. And one of those stories was that I needed him to change so I could be happy. I am a focused, powerful, strong woman. I've always known my life was going to be leadership in this world. And I was very achievement driven. And I always saw Josh as this, like, if you could just change, we could be better. If you would just support me more, I could be more successful. If you just made more money, I wouldn't have to work so hard. If you, then I can. I was constantly giving my power outside of myself, needing him to change. And so there was a long period of our life that I would say I had pushing energy towards him. Let's go to church. Let's go do these things. Let's go all these things so I could change him so that I could have the future that I saw, that vision of my reality I wanted meant he needed to be different to be in it. So there was this pushing energy that shifted and I shifted into an energy of acceptance. Kind of hands back. That was a good dynamic. That was a good next best step for me. I'm going to stop trying to change him. I'm just going to accept him as he is. So then there was less tension. I started just accepting what was. But then I realized I'm not living the life that I want. This still isn't it. Accepting this version of who we are is still not enough. And I started to write down, if I was to show up as the best version of myself in the future that I desire, in the marriage of my dreams, the purpose and the impact and all the things, what would it look like? And I started to write down 10 affirmations every single morning that if they were true, I would by default be living in the reality of my dreams. And one of the things that I wrote down was, I'm an intentional and exceptional wife. If we had the marriage of our dreams, I'm intentional and exceptional. And so then I would ask myself the next question, and how will I show up as her today? And I was like, no. She's so patient. She's so kind. She's so loving. She goes first. I kept waiting for Josh to love me well first. I kept waiting for him to think of me first. I kept waiting for him to be all these things. And I realized she did it, whether he did or not. And so it's funny, Josh had this frying pan. He cooked eggs every single morning. And for some reason, he likes to cook them at a degree that they burn. And so the pan needs to soak. It needs to soak in some water, he knows. And so this pan, every day I'd work at home and he'd go to work. And all day long, I'd come into the kitchen and see this pan soaking in the sink. And I'd be like, why does he hate me? Why does he hate me? How many times have we had to talk about the damn pan and he won't clean it? He won't clean it.
Clean the pan.
And so it's real. And so by 5 p.m. when he would walk in the door, I would be like waiting to talk to him about the pan he left again. Waiting. And he's like, what the hell just happened? Like my energy's been rising all day for this moment to talk to him about how he can't do this one little thing to make me happy, blah, blah. So as I started to say, I have to stop waiting for him. I have to start being the version of myself I want to be. I said, I'm an intentional, exceptional wife. And I was like, no. She doesn't just not complain about the pan. She washes it for him. She doesn't just wash the pan like this, like, oh, I'm going to show him the dry pan in the rack when he gets home. I'm going to make sure he sees it. No, she goes, thank you for this good man. How lucky I am to have a man that eats healthy, who goes to work, who loves me. Thank you, as she washes the pan. And y'all, I know that sounds so stupid and silly. It was game-changing for me. Because it's not about what you do, it's who you are being when you do it. And so I decided to bring an energy to my marriage that said, I love you anyway. I love you first. I started to say, I have to love myself, whether you're going to love me in the way that I want to. I had to stop waiting for him to give me the things that I wanted. I had to be them for myself. And that was hard, you guys. There's a book called The Dance of Anger. And it talks about how in every relationship with your children, with your parents, with your spouse, friendships, you have a dynamic. And when someone steps out of that and goes, hey, I don't want to dance like this anymore, this other person's going to be like, excuse me, kick back in. I don't know what to do when you're patient now. So, what is this? Oh, you meditate now? And I'm like, yes, I do. I meditate now. And I'm patient and I'm kind and I'm all these things. But it was interesting because I remember this one time we had a fight and I was like, I don't want to fight right now. And I was like, I need to go to the other room. And I remember he followed me to the other room, like, what? But it was these tiny little imperceivable shifts, you guys, where I kept realigning to the woman I said I want to be, to the life that I want to have, whether he's with me or not now. And that was a miracle. Like, he wasn't like, I love you here, let me be all the things you've ever wanted in weeks. It just was that first there was less tension. Like, hey, do you want to go do this thing? And he'd be like, yeah, wow, that's really thoughtful. And all of a sudden he would want to return. So interesting how giving and receiving goes. I had been waiting, such lacking energy, but I was like, hey, I see you. Hey, I see you. And he was like, okay, hey, I see you back. Whether he was conscious of it or not, we started shifting in that dynamic. And so what ended up happening was we ended up really having such conscious, loving shifts in our relationship. And by me changing myself, I can't tell you what day it happened, but we became different because it was one little moment at a time. And all of a sudden he started becoming a more loving and patient and intentional person. We were able to start having actually bigger conversations about our life. I remember one day I was like, what do you want for your future? And he was like, I don't know. I mean, this is already more than I could have imagined. And I was like, how can I be with someone who doesn't know where they want to go? But at that point in time, he didn't know how to dream bigger. So for me to expect that from him on day one, he's asking himself a big question. It was too much. So I just thought, okay, one day at a time, one day at a time. And what I want to share is that when we change our inner worlds, our outer worlds will respond. And if you believe me in that, and if you know it's inevitable, does it matter how long it takes? All of a sudden, it didn't matter. If all of a sudden I was internally happy, I was internally generous, I was internally, although it was challenging, don't get me wrong, I was already starting to live the life I wanted to live for me now. And it was affecting and releasing him from needing to be anything in any certain amount of time. And as soon as I started to release that, I mean, I would say over the last 2.5 years, we're night and day different in our lives and what we expect. Josh is one of the most powerful and brilliant and intentional and kind and impactful presences you will ever meet. If you get the opportunity to be in his space, he has a presence that overtakes you
100%.
in the best way. Say that again.
100%.
100%. And that was something that opened up and opened up and opened up on its own beautiful timing. And so I want to just share that if you have someone in your life, you want them to change you.
Uh-oh.
If someone in your life that you want them to change you. All we can ever do is change ourselves and affect the people around us. Their change has to always be internal and for themselves. And so I've watched Josh open up and become a man. Actually, I'm going to be honest, he is better than I dreamed of. He is more than I could have put on paper. He is, and I feel like we're just beginning. Every day I'm just like, wow, you're amazing. Like, tell me about you, because I didn't know this was possible. It's so beautiful. And to watch him love his life and show up differently in all the places he is, it's just incredible. But if you want to change someone in your world, change yourself.
Love that.
And it starts with personal responsibility. And I know even that personal responsibility has changed the way Josh has shown up.